Hey folks, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk more about some of the basic building blocks for creating really solid drawings. And we're going to start off by using our pencil brush to create some volumetric shapes. Now, this is something that I think that if you really grasp early on and practice, I think it will really allow you to be able to draw pretty much anything you want to draw. And it's something that I've been using for a number of years and it's super helpful. So let's get started. The first thing I'll do is I'll hit the B key to activate my brush tool. And I'm going to go and select my pencil brush. And I've got a ton of brushes here. I'll just choose my pencil brush. You should have it already installed. I'm going to pick a grayish value here. And I'm making a brand new layer. So the keyboard shortcut to make a new layer is what? Shift, Option, Command, N, or Shift, Alt, Control, N. I will say keyboard shortcuts over and over again throughout this term, and hopefully they will stick, and hopefully you'll remember them, and you will be able to be more efficient when you're working within Photoshop. So the very first volumetric shape that we're going to look at is the cylinder. So the cylinder is basically an elliptical shape. It has a cap that's elliptical. You can use the Shift key to create some straight lines, and there's another end cap. And here we go. I'll draw these contours. These lines that are in the middle here are known as contours, and that indicates the surface topology. That's basically giving us an idea of how round this cylindrical structure is. Now, with that cylinder, you want to be able to draw that cylinder from multiple angles. So if you were to draw it looking at it at a side angle, it would look something like this. And I'll draw some contours, right? It starts out big and it kind of tapers as we get further away from it. Now, cylinders are used quite a bit, not only when drawing mechanical objects, but when you're drawing things like trees and other organic elements. This is kind of an example of using this volumetric shape. For example, if I'm drawing the branch of a tree, I would basically start off with that cylinder and it would be tapered. In other words, it would be thicker on one end and thinner on the other end. And then what I would do is simply add other cylinders and taper it. And what this is doing is it's giving us a really strong structure. It looks dimensional. It has some depth to it. And you can see that these cylinders are getting progressively thinner and thinner. So that's an example of using the cylinder. So you want to be able to draw this from multiple angles. And you want to be able to draw both regular cylinders as well as tapered cylinders. The way you would draw a tapered cylinder is you would draw a smaller ellipse and simply connect those two lines together. And then you would draw your contours. Now I want to see the contours that you're creating because it allows me to understand that you understand that you're thinking about this in terms of 3D and not 2D. So that's our first shape, the cylinder. The second shape is going to be, and I'll put this on a new layer, is going to be our cube. And it's basically, I'm drawing it like this. This is a cube comprised of two trapezoidal shapes, right? And we're looking at this at a 2-point perspective. In other words, this looks like it actually has some dimension and volume to it, right? And we'll talk more about perspective much later on, but for right now, this is one of those building blocks. And when I say cube, sometimes I'll also indicate, rectangle. So if you wanted to draw a rectangle, you would just extend one of the sides. So that's the second building block. The third building block, and I'll make a new layer for that, and you can see those keyboard shortcuts popping up down below, is the sphere. Now this is where those arm exercises that I talked about earlier come in handy. You want to get comfortable to the point where you can use your entire arm to create smooth spheres. Now, it will take some time, it will take some practice, and you've got this, you can do it, but just keep practicing every day. It's like any kind of exercise or athletic activity, you've got to go ahead and practice it every day and you will get better. So here are the contours for our spheres. And I also lump ellipses in that category too. Those are those egg shapes. So you want to be able to draw spheres and ellipses from different angles as well, and also indicate the contour. Now I forgot to indicate the contour for our cubes and our rectangular structures, and the easiest way to do that is to find the midpoint of one of the lines on the side, like we're looking at the vertical lines, and just simply indicate that as such, and then connect the two. And then what you'll do is you'll find the midpoint between the corner and the line that you just made and put a mark there. Do the same thing on the opposite side. We've got the midpoint between these 2 points. And I promise this is the most math you're going to have. It's not really going to be, there's no mathematics involved, but it's just about basically finding the middle and then connecting those lines. And then you'll do the same thing for the vertical lines. So that's the contour. Same thing applies over here, for example. Find the midpoint, find the midpoint, find the midpoint, draw lines that connect them. Find the midpoint between the corner and the middle. Find the midpoint between this corner and the middle. Connect the lines, and then do the same thing over here. Now, we have to know these basic fundamentals in order to really get good at drawing. So this is kind of like learning your scales if you've ever played an instrument. You got to learn your scales before you can go ahead and play a piece of music. It's the same concept here. So while this might seem a little pedestrian to some of you, like, oh my gosh, I want to actually draw something cool, we will get there. But we have to kind of work at these basic shapes. All right, so now we've got cylinders, we've got cubes, we've got spheres, we've got, now we need to add cones. So cone is basically an elliptical shape with a point, and you're basically connecting those points together, and then here is the overall contour. And again, I'll just indicate these as dotted lines so that we know that's a dimensional shape. And if we wanted to draw that shape at an angle, there's our spherical shape. And cones come in various lengths. You know, the obvious thing is you can draw an evergreen tree, you can draw a bunch of other things, but this is an extreme example of a cylinder that is tapered to a point, right? So let's take a look. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 basic volumetric shapes. And the 5th shape is actually not a volumetric shape. Volume means that you can actually pour something into it. So when I say the word volumetric shape, imagine like a milk jug, or imagine any one of these objects here where you can take liquid and literally pour it into it. It occupies a certain volume. The other shape that you want to get really adept at drawing is a grid. And so what we'll do is we'll start off by drawing a line. I'm holding down the shift key to do that. And then I'll draw another line that's going to be wider. I'll connect the endpoints. Doesn't have to be perfect. But what you're doing, again, to create a grid is to go ahead and find the middle on both top and bottom edges, find the middle on both side edges, connect the appropriate lines together like so, and then find the midpoint. And you can hit Command Z to undo, which is your friend. And find the middle, and now you've got a grid. And you can make this grid, you can subdivide this grid as much as you want. So I would recommend practicing drawing the grid, because when we're placing objects on the grid, for example, if you wanted to put a cone right next to a sphere and you wanted them to occupy the same believable space, you'll want to use a grid. We'll talk about that in an upcoming video. So this is just an introduction to your basic volumetric shapes. Think of these as your building blocks that we are going to be using for creating anything like vehicles, human beings, etc. So we'll talk more about how all of this stuff connects in a future video, but for right now, I want you to practice these basic volumetric shapes and practice drawing the grid. All right, thanks so much. We'll see you in the next video.